The Great Depression and World War II brought an increasing economic woes to South Africa, which had convinced the government to strengthen its policies of racial segregation. Apartheid translated from the Afrikaans meaning apartness. Apartheid was a system of racial segregation and discrimination in South Africa. It was the ideology that was supported by the National Party government, and this ideology was introduced to the South African society in the 1948. 1948, since the Afrikaner Nation Party won the general election under the slogan of apartheid, their goal was to not only separate the South Africa's white minority from its non-white majority, but they also wanted to divide the non-whites from each other and divide them into different tribal lines so that they can increase their own political power. 1950, with the apartheid system in the society, the government enforced different laws, and there were a total of 148 apartheid laws. There were a lot of different important figures in the apartheid, however, the most important one was Nelson Mandela. Mandela is against the apartheid, and he worked a lot towards stopping or bringing the apartheid to an end. He started as a member of the African National Congress Party, which began in the 1940s. He was a leader who was against the white minorities and the racial action that divided South Africa. Unfortunately, his actions put him in prison for almost 3 decades. When he was released from prison in 1990, he joined to completely destruct the apartheid in 1994 and became the first black president of South Africa. He was the one who brought an end to the apartheid and has been a global advocate for human rights. The apartheid have affected the South African society in many different ways. The economic impacts of the apartheid was that white workers were paid more than the black workers even if they were working the same amount. Additionally, during that time, the society had a high rate of taxation and restrictive labor laws. Lastly, the income in South Africa's economy was mainly spent on the white population in terms of health, services, education, housing, electricity, and sanitation. They were all provided to the whites by the government. Social impacts of the apartheid was that it increased the social tension in South Africa as it widened the social and economic gap between the races. It affected the non-whites as it devalued their self-esteem, as whites saw blacks as uneducated, ignorant, and incompetent. And because of the lack in knowledge, training, as well as encouragement for the non-whites, this enforced the stereotypes of the non-whites in South Africa. Furthermore, in the society, different racial groups will have to live and develop separately, which causes separation between people in the community. They banned marriages between whites and people of other races. People were not able to marry their loved ones if they were not from the same race. Non-whites were at the bottom of the social chain as they were the ones who received the worst facilities. Basically, people in the society had no freedom at all. They were under all these restrictive laws and they had to follow it. They were restricted from doing so many things, it's like their lives were being completely controlled, and they had no decision but to obey the laws. During 1976, thousands of black children were against the Afrikaans language requirements for black African students, which resulted in the police opening fire with tear gas and bullets. Following that, there were a lot of protests that occurred and the government crackdowns combined with the national economic recession, which drew more international attention to South Africa. Which that shattered all the illusions and lies that the government made, saying that the apartheid had brought peace or prosperity to the nation. In 1973, the United Nations General Assembly had criticized apartheid, and in 1976, the UN Security Council had voted to officially enforce the law to ban the sale of arms to South Africa. Because of the pressure from the international community, the National Party government were under pressure. They decided to establish or make changes to the social, political, and economic practice, which includes ending past laws and the ban of interracial sex and marriage. In 1994, a new constitution took place, and it gave the rights for the blacks and other racial groups to vote, resulting in an alliance of political parties forming a government with a non-white majority, which marked the official ending of the apartheid system in South Africa. Even the apartheid system was long gone and it has shifted from a free political election in South Africa. Nowadays, racism still remains a huge issue. The main factor of this is because of the economic inequality and poor governance during the apartheid. Historically, white South Africans had always had political and economic power and were extremely racist, but with the work of leaders like Nelson Mandela, South Africa had a peaceful transition from apartheid to more of a democratic republic with a new constitution. Although the country is more under control, but there is still racism, crime, and violence at present. The injustice of the apartheid is still felt by the black majority, and the white majority still sees themselves as superior regardless of the new system. These are the long-term effects from the past years that will most likely continue to be issues for the years to come. During the apartheid, people looked into communism and socialism as an ideal ideology that would offer equality and opportunity to South Africa's non-white people. A possible better alternative for the apartheid would be communism. Communism would be a better alternative at that time, as this is because since there are no class between the social classes, then the whites and non-whites wouldn't be discriminated, and the different acts and laws wouldn't be enforced, which wouldn't create such problems in South Africa during the apartheid. And even at present day, a sizable segment of South Africa's population still sees Marxism as the road to economic relief and prosperity.